Barrier down and up to the starting line.
We have a tremendous historical involvement in engineering. I mean, that's what the British were, were leaders in the Industrial Revolution. And I think that's still deep in the consciousness of a lot of the British people.
Motors cut.
I'm a true British citizen and I've got a British bike.
Wait for it.
You couldn't be British, could you? Buy British, keep British.
Off to a good start. Well bunched and running along the flat.
Once known as the workshop of the world, Britain led the way in manufacturing things that lasted. This was particularly true of the British motorcycle. Made in Britain meant strength, precision and quality. Between the two world wars and up until the early 1960s, British motorcycles were a dominant force. Their innovative and daring designs were famous the world over. The machines were a potent display of engineering skill, powerful symbols of a great industrial nation. No other motorcycle exemplifies this great achievement better than its 1925 SS80 Brough Superior, hailed as the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles.
George Brough combined both his experience as a very fine rider of bikes, and he raced a lot of bikes at Brooklands and places like that, with his undoubted engineering capabilities, to put together probably the best that was available at the time within the British motorcycle industry. He certainly used the best engine around at the time, and probably the best engine in the Jap. Certainly he used components like Castle forks, which were, again, the best that were available at the time.
The search for engineering excellence led Brough to the London firm of J.A. Prestwich, well known for their series of V-twin engines. He also used his exquisite phonics and speedometer. The distinctive fishtails on the silencers are typical of the time.
The exhaust pipes are quite interesting. It's quite a very complicated piece of pipe bending to take the pipe from that side right across to the exhaust the other side. I'm an engineer by profession, and it's just nice to have and to ride as an example of what in those days was a very fine piece of engineering.
The Brough Superior has been slated by a great number of people as being a tremendous B.S.A motorcycle, a combination of a whole lot of parts that have been put together by all sorts of different people. On the contrary, I think he was an expert in marketing, and what he did was he pulled out all the best bits and put them together to produce a very attractive, marketable bike. He put this marvellous, big, bulbous, nickel-plated tank on the bike and these wonderful flowing exhausts, and all that sort of thing was really made a beautiful looking thing. It may well have been a B.S.A of parts collected from all sorts of different manufacturers, but there's really nothing new about that.
The Brough Superior was never designed as a motorcycle for the mass market. In the 1930s, other companies were left to manufacture motorcycles for the working man. It was at this time that Britain produced some of the most reliable motorcycles ever. Titch Allen runs this museum at Stanford Hall that celebrates the best and worst of the British motorcycle industry.
The 30s were a time of great engineering opportunity, and some quite remarkable machines were made, like the Speed Twin Triumph.
The 1938 Triumph Speed Twin was perhaps the most successful British motorcycle ever.
It was correct balance of a machine that looked right, went right, and cost the right amount. The Speed Twin was so good, and such a wonderful seller, that it changed the shape of motorcycles the world over in the next decade because it was such a success on the market.
The Triumph Speed Twin used a completely new engine format. Its 500cc parallel twin was effectively two single cylinders lashed together. Designed by Edward Turner, the Speed Twin revolutionized the industry.
Design is personally supervised by the managing director, Mr. Edward Turner. The closest attention is given to even the smallest detail, and every effort taken to ensure that Triumph owners the world over have their needs fully met in every way.
Well, Edward Turner had to look at the market and try and boost it for Triumph. So he produced this bike that looked very much like the bikes of the day, mainly singles. It still pleased the public because it looked like a single, and this one being a twin had more acceleration, and it was built lightly for cheapness, and this is why it really took off and took the world by storm and set the trend for the next 40 years. Most other manufacturers copied it during that time. One of the nice features of these 38 Speed Twins is this tank top panel. On the left here you've got an ammeter which shows the charge to the battery, and on the right here you've got an oil pressure gauge which shows the condition of your engine, and this little light here acts as an illumination light, and also it comes out to act as a lead light. In fact, it had phenomenal performance, so much so the world's police forces all took it on so they could catch all the criminals.
The Speed Twin was a remarkable success for Triumph, winning markets from Europe to the Far East. In the late 30s, the British motorcycle industry dominated the market for mass transport with purpose-built machines for the general public. People used their motorcycles not just for leisure, but for work and business.
If we got enough money for a motorbike, it had to be an all-rounder. So we bought a good sound sporting 350, and we went to work on it each day. We went courting on this at the weekend, or we rode in a trial, or a grass track, or perhaps even we might have done a bit of mild road racing, all on that same bike.
From the 1930s through to the 50s, British riders and bikes were at the forefront of racing. Winning sold products and competition was intense. A.J.S, Matchless and Norton all benefited from this competition success. B.S.A was one of the oldest companies making motorcycles. Their success in the Isle of Man TTs led to the KTT series. This Mark 8 was renowned for its speed and beauty. Whilst many enthusiasts enjoy the challenge of restoring their own classic motorcycles, others prefer to leave it to professionals. From around £2,000 for a complete bike, James Tennant Isles offers different levels of perfection.
Well, there are two types of people that come to us for bike restorations. I think the majority of them are particularly interested in their nostalgic idea. There's a nostalgic reason for their interest, something to do with their own youth or their involvement with a great British engineering past. And then there's a different type, and sometimes they're together, of course, who are simply interested in getting something restored as well as they possibly can. They're interested in some kind of development of perfection for its own sake, and it happens to be about a bike.
Hello. Good to see you. Oh yes, this looks promising.
No, hope it's what you expect. It's been a long story.
Victor Gauntlet, ex-managing director of Aston Martin, collects anything British. His four-cylinder Matchless Silver Hawk cost 3 times its market value to restore.
Yeah, that's a hell of a job.
I'm hoping you'll have a go on it. What do you think? You fancy having a ride?
Absolutely, but I've got to hear it, haven't I?
They're not looking at the buying or the restoring of a motorcycle because of its own intrinsic value in the marketplace. That's completely irrelevant because the cost of the bike plus the cost of restoration is going to be probably several times what they could actually sell it for if they wanted to. So they're obviously willing to spend a great deal of money in some way to achieve some objective they have. And I think the objective is probably of owning a British motorcycle, of riding it on the road, of being able to go down the road on a lovely sunny day and sweep through the curves. And I think that's something that they're prepared to pay quite a lot of money for. Well, clearly they are, because they do spend this vast amount more than their bike is actually worth.
Change gear soon. Do you think he knows what he's doing? Probably not. He'll get used to it.
The matchless Silver Hawk had a V4 engine. This 1938 Ariel was a square 4. The arrangement of 4 cylinders in a square was an elegant solution to the problem of fitting a multi-cylinder engine into a compact frame. A design which lasted until the introduction of this latest square 4 model in 1959. Designed by Edward Turner, the square 4s only ever appealed to a niche market. They were Ariel's flagship model for nearly 30 years, from 1931 to 1959. This was the golden age of British motorcycling. For a time at least, nothing could go wrong. In the late 1950s, the British motorcycle industry was still using the production methods and practices of the 30s. Motorcycles were built by the lathe and blazing tools. These little Ariel two-strokes promised to change all that. They were the first British motorcycles to use mass production techniques.
Behind me are the Aerial Leader and the Aerial Arrow. The Leader came first, and then because the boys used to take the outer casings off for lightness and for accessibility, they then carried on and designed the Arrow, which is basically on the same frame. This was one of the first pressed steel frame bikes. Before, it was all tubular frames.
The process of pressing steel for motorcycles was a production technique taken from the car industry, along with the use of new materials.
Then you've got plastics being introduced, something that wasn't seen on bikes before. The total enclosed concept, which people before used to think of more as a scooter, but it's a real bike in a scooter form in a sense.
Ariel's strategy was to present a new kind of motorcycle. They offered luxury extras as standard, full fairing with windscreen, enclosed engine, even a clock was offered for the dashboard.
Now we did all this, and then unfortunately the market was wrong. The concept wasn't really accepted by motorcyclists, and it was at the time when the Japanese were coming in strength.
The Ariels may have won a style war, but they couldn't compete with the reliability and finish of the Japanese manufacturers like Honda. Unlike the British, Honda understood the needs of the consumers and knew how to market new ideas successfully. The collapse of the world's biggest motorcycle empire had begun. But the Japanese were not the only problem. The enemy lay closer to home.
Weak management and management that really didn't know what they were doing at that time. Strong unions, lack of investment, a rather blasé, couldn't care less attitude to the influx of Japanese bikes. It had to come.
They were never very good at producing a bike for the ordinary man in the street who was not a motorcycle enthusiast, who wanted to go to work and get to work on time, and didn't want to know about cams and sprockets and things like that.
On the site of this West Midlands housing estate, there used to stand the Meriden Triumph Factory, a legendary symbol of Britain's engineering achievement. Daytonas, trophies and Thunderbirds rolling off the production line has now been replaced by the swishing of suburban curtains and the click of Velux windows. That this fountainhead of British industry should be replaced by suburbia is a potent symbol of Britain's industrial decline. Thousands of people used to earn a living by coming here to manufacture great motorcycles. Huey Hancock's was one of them.
This is the old number 2 factory, as we used to call it, situated directly across the road from the main Meriden plant. And we brought machines over here to be got ready for export, for dispatch to countries all over the world. If you were into motorcycles and you were a motorcyclist, it was without doubt the finest place in the world. You couldn't work anywhere better. And as a young man, you couldn't wait to get up in the morning to come to work.
This 1961 Triumph Bonneville is regarded by many as the E-Type Jaguar of the motorcycle world.
Well, this bike of mine is a 1961 Bonneville. A duplex Grand Prix unit. I've had it 3 years. To me, it's one of the best bikes that Triumph ever made. I mean, a real sporty looking bike. And everybody, all the lads used to love these bikes.
I should think the most distinctive feature of the first Bonneville was its racy lines. They had thin bore pipes, which speeded up the flow of the exhaust gas, straight through Burgess silencers. They were also painted in the new pastel colours that the Americans desired.
Well, Triumph is Triumph, isn't it? It's a Triumph name, they're Triumph in every way, that's my opinion. It's a great name, Triumph. That's it.
The bike looked like it was doing 100 miles an hour, even when it was standing still. It was great. Of course, everybody wanted one.
But the trouble was, you couldn't get one. For love or money. Dealers wanted Bonnevilles. The public wanted them. Triumph took their time. Eventually, sales caught up with demand, and the Bonneville became their best seller. But even the Bonnie couldn't save the industry. Triumph, along with all the other great names in British motorcycling, collapsed. By the mid-1970s, there was virtually nothing left. Today, the Triumph name lives on in a range of high-performance bikes. They are genuinely made in Britain, but they have more in common with Kawasaki than their British legacy. B.S.A. were Triumph's main competitors, producing a similar range of models. Their flagship had a considerable racetrack history.
Walt Handley rode on the B.S.As at Brooklands, and people who lapped at 100 miles an hour were awarded a gold star. At B.S.As, because Handley had done it on a B.S.A, they called the sports model a B.S.A gold star.
Well, I've always liked gold stars from a lad like, and it's always been my ambition. I've had several gold stars from being 17 when I passed my test. They're just absolutely fantastic, the sound of them. Everybody can hear a gold star coming. As soon as they hear this machine coming, they'd know it was a gold star.
A British single is something else. You can actually feel what it's doing. The engine is thumping away, and you just get a whole sensation to the whole of the bike. It's unlike riding a twin. It's just got its own feeling about it. Well, this bike's obviously a clubber's trim. By clubber's trim, it's got the clip-on handlebars, whereas the ordinary bikes had a pair of touring handlebars which fixed there. It's got the rear set footrest, which is racing style, a close ratio gearbox, rev counter. It's got a quite highly tuned engine, which is 500cc. It's got the 1.5-inch GP racing carburettor, the same carburettor they fitted to the racing bikes at that time. It's got a very efficient front brake, which all goes together to make a good sports bike, a good fast, well, racing bike really.
The Gold Star wasn't the only choice of bike for anyone wanting to look the part of a racing hero in the 60s. Norton inspired great loyalty with a bike that was favoured by a new breed of ton-up leather boy, the aptly named Dominator.
Well, it's a Norton Dominator 99, finished in the red, which Norton's brought out in 1958 only, but this one is a genuine red Norton Dominator, as I have the original logbook, so that proves it. Distinguishing features of it, really, I suppose, are the featherbed frame, which is sort of well known throughout the world. And the story goes that when it was taken out on test, the tester who brought it back said that it was like riding on a featherbed. Well, the front forks on this machine are the famous road holder front forks. It's a very rigid front fork, which gives good handling and good steering once again with the frame.
I met him when he had a Norton in 1961, and I did say to him to get him to go out with me. I only want to go on your bike, I don't want to marry you. And here we are, 29 years later, still married, 2 grown-up sons.
And still riding Norton.
Still riding Norton.
I used to knock around with 3 or 4 mates of mine who had Triumphs and B.S.As, etc. We used to sort of go off on Saturday evenings and down the pie stall at Chatham and sort of stand around and have a cup of tea and a pie for about a shilling. Yeah, I was a member of the rockers scene, if you like to call it that.
In the 60s, the sport of cafe racing was the biker's pastime. Young men, completely oblivious to their own mortality, would hold unofficial races down the local bypass. Those who survived would congregate at transport cabs, like Johnson's on the A20, warming up over huge mugs of tea, talking birds and bikes.
There's a lot of people, you got a lot of your mates around you who's much the same age bracket, and you're all back together. You're back on bikes, you're back on rock and roll team. And you don't change a lot. So my 2 ex-wives said, they all tried to change me.
Here on a cold November night, a group of rockers get together to celebrate the heyday of the British motorcycle.
I haven't changed a lot. Still wear tight jeans, wings and biggest, still love the rock and roll, still love the bikes, the British bikes, of course.
Skinny white sailor, the chances were slender, the beauties were brief. Shall I mourn your decline with some Thunderbird wine and a black handkerchief? I miss your sad Virginia whisper. I miss the voice that called my heart. Sweet Jean Vincent, young and old.
The book Classic Motorcycles by Gary Johnston, price £16.99, is available from most bookshops.
Sweet